Bava Metzia Daf Chav Aleph. We begin the second parak of the Masechta Parak Elu Metzias, which discusses primarily the halachos of when you find an object or money, are you allowed to keep it or do you have to return it? Now, the way to return it would be to make an announcement. The Gemara will discuss the rules of how you announce, and you would only return it based on some type of proof or indication that you found the rightful owner, which would be a siman, a sign that he can tell you that he wouldn't know unless he is really the owner. We'll discuss what types of simanim are acceptable. It could be something interesting about the object, could be the place, could be the number of objects that were there. Now, the way you'd be able to keep it is if for some reason the original owner has relinquished his ownership of it, and that he has allowed it to become hefker, he's allowed it to become ownerless. And that would be a concept called yish. Yish means he gives up hope. As soon as he gives up hope, he withdraws his ownership from it, and then it's available for you to take. Now, there could be a number of reasons that he would give up hope, that he would be meyayish, we'll just see the word yish, of ever getting it back again and relinquish his ownership. One might be because he doesn't think he'll ever find it. Another might be because he thinks that he can never, even if he finds it, he won't be able to get it from the person who has it because he won't be able to prove, won't be able to provide a siman if there is no siman, or if the siman is the type of siman which will be lost. Another reason might be is if it'll be found, it's in a place where it'll be found by people who will not bother returning it. A totally different reason might be if it's just not worth his bother, if he knows exactly where it is, but it's not worth his bother to go back for it. The Gemara will discuss under what circumstances can you assume that the yish happened. That is our first Mishnah. And the second Mishnah will be a number of examples in which you cannot assume that the yish happened, and therefore you can't return it. Therefore you can't keep it, you have to return it. Now, the Mishnah, which we'll do first, which discusses a number of examples of found objects which you can keep because there is assumed to be yish, will be a list of examples pretty much, except for the end. And the Gemara later in a few daf will give us the reason that each one is adding halacha to the other ones. And the Gemara will discuss one of the particulars, and then it'll get into the famous machlokes Abaye and Rava as to what happens if the owner does not know that he lost it, but had he known, he would have been meyayish, what we call yish midas. Does that count as if it's yish and he withdrew his ownership or not? So let's begin. The Mishnah says, here's a list of things which you're allowed to keep, and then in the next Mishnah we'll discuss things which you have to announce and therefore return. Ones you're allowed to keep are if you find scattered fruits or scattered coins. The Gemara will explain why you're allowed to keep those. That'll be our first discussion. Next is if you find small bundles of grain that are tied up and they're in Rosh Hashanah, even if they have a siman, people will step on them there and the siman will be lost. Next is if you find pressed cakes of figs. Fourth is loaves of bread that are made by a commercial baker. They're all made the same and everybody could buy them, therefore there's no proof that you can't possibly prove that it's yours because everybody could buy the same bread. If you find strings of fish, similar situation. If you find pieces of meat, if you find rolls of wool that are taken from a certain country, not from around here, and therefore they're all similar to each other. If you find combed out flax, or if you find combed out purpled wool, again, these are things that have a similar aspect, and there's nothing particular about it that would be a siman. All these things, like we said, the Mishnah repeats now, you can keep. Now, this is Rabbi Meir's shita. Rabbi Huda seems to argue, but he says something which doesn't necessarily disagree. He says anything which is different than the standard, anything which is something unique about it, you do have to announce, even amongst these items. And the Gemara will explain what point is he arguing on Rabbi Meir. And an example of that is if you find pressed cake of figs and there's a pottery inside it, or if you find a loaf of bread and there's money inside that, you have to return that. Now, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar adds another halacha there, and he says anything which is so new that the original owner isn't familiar with it himself, and therefore he would not know of any siman, even if there is one, you don't have to return that either. Now, the Gemara begins. The first thing we saw is if you find scattered fruits. The Gemara wants to know, what is the significance of scattered fruits? First of all, how scattered does it have to be to qualify as being scattered fruits? Rav Yitzchak says 1 kav scattered over 4 amos. So the Gemara asks, I don't understand. There's no siman on fruits, right? So if there's no siman on fruits, what's the difference if it's scattered or if it's not scattered? The only way it could possibly be that the owner is not meyayish is if he knows where he put them. And you should be able to tell by how they're lying that it was placed there. So if that's a situation that you can tell it was put down, then it's not lost. The owner put it there and is coming back for it. So for sure you can't keep it. And if it's not, if it looks like it fell, then there is no siman, so you should be allowed to keep it no matter how scattered it is. So what does that have to do with anything? So our answer is we're not talking about a classic lost object. We are talking about where it's put down. You can see it was put down there. However, it is in the threshing area. Then it's where people come to thresh their grain. And a certain amount is not worth their labor to pick up. So if it's one kav spread over 4 amos, he knows it's there, but he's not coming back for it. He's mafker it because it's not worth his labor. So therefore, that amount of spread, he's miyayish, not because he doesn't know where it is, because he doesn't want to get it back, but because it's not worth it for him to get it back. And therefore, he's mafker, the Gemara says. Now, if it's spread over a lesser area, it is worth his labor, and he will come back for it, and you have to you cannot keep it for yourself. Now, the Gemara asks, is the essential point here that it's too much work or that it's too little value? I understand it's a trade-off of work for value, but which is the essential issue? What if you move the needle in one direction, but the trade-off is the same? So we're going to ask, what if it's half a kav over 2 amos? Same ratio, less value, but also less work. Next shot would be, what if it's 2 kav spread over 8 amos? Twice as much work, but also twice as much value. Again, do we say that because it's more value, therefore it is worth collecting, or do we say since it's twice as much work, it's more work, and the work was the issue, and therefore you don't want to collect these either? Now, Gemara brings some similar examples. What if you have a kava of shumshimin? Shumshimin are sesame seeds. They're very small. It's a lot of work to collect them, so therefore it's more work. Does that count? Again, it's more work, but it's also more valuable. So would you say that if the issue was too much work, then here it's more work? Or would you say that the issue was not enough value, here there is more value? And now the last question that Gemara asks in this series is, again, what if you have a kava of dates or of pomegranates? Those are much larger and easier to pick up than your standard. And if that's spread over 4 amos, do you say, well, since it's easier, it's less work, and therefore it is worth it for him to go back? Or again, do you say, since it has less value, it's not going to be worth it for him? The Gemara does not answer any of these and leaves them all as a tekel. Now, the Gemara brings the sugya of yish shaloi midas. Yish shaloi midas, again, means that it is something that the owner is not aware that he has lost yet. However, had he been aware, and when he will become aware that it's lost, he will certainly be miyayish because it has no siman, and therefore there's no way for him to get it back, and he'll just give up hope, and he will relinquish his ownership of it. Now, the Gemara says there are 2 similar cases where we can all agree on the halacha. If it's something that has a siman, he's certainly not going to be miyayish. He knows that he'll be able to reclaim it with a siman. Therefore, even if he didn't find out about it, you can't keep it. Even if you know for sure that he's miyayish later, the Gemara says, you hear him say, oh yeah, I lost this and I'm never going to get it back, so we understand he's miyayish, doesn't matter. If you picked it up and you took possession of it at the time and it still belonged to him, it came into your rishus as stolen property, it's not yours, and therefore you have to return it even though he's miyayish later. Contrast is if it's something which is lost from everybody. It's something which is in an area where the sea, where high tide sweeps it out to sea, or a river overflows. No one can get that, and therefore it's considered to be uprooted from the person's possession. Min ha-Torah, the Gemara will give a pasuk later, that the Torah takes away from him. You don't need him to be miyayish. He loses possession of it automatically. There, everyone agrees that there's yish right away. If somehow you get hold of it, you can keep it even if he doesn't find out about it. In the case, though, where it has no siman, and he's not miyayish yet, however, he will be miyayish when he finds out about it, that's what Abaye and Rava. Abaye says it's still not yish yet, he hasn't been miyayish yet, he still retains ownership, and therefore, if you pick it up at this point, you cannot keep it, you have to return it, even if you later find out that he's miyayish. Rava, however, says it is considered to be yish. Different gersais is exactly why. It seems like when he's ultimately miyayish, it's already out of his possession from now. And therefore, it's considered to be as if it is hefker, and you're allowed to keep it. Now, the Gemara begins by bringing rayas. So the Gemara is pretty much going to go through our Mishnah. Our Mishnah has had a lot of cases where you're able to keep them. And you could ask the question, why should you be able to keep them? How do you know that the owner knows that he has lost it? And if he doesn't know, then it's a case of yish midas. The Gemara first has the case of fruits that were scattered. The Gemara says, how do you know that he knows that he lost it? Maybe he's not aware. The Gemara says, what do you mean? We already said that it's talking about a case of the threshing floor, and therefore he definitely knows. As a matter of fact, he knows exactly where it is. It's not even lost, and he's leaving it there on purpose because he doesn't want to go back for it. Next case was if you found scattered money. So the Gemara says maybe he doesn't know, and it's Yesh Lamidas, how can he keep it? So the Gemara says a concept which we will use to answer several of these questions, which is said by Rabbi Yitzchak. The Gemara says it later, that people check their valuables all the time. He's constantly checking his wallet, checking his pockets for the valuables that he keeps there, and therefore he knows right away that he lost it. If you find money, you can assume that the owner is aware that it's lost. Next case is if you find pressed figs or loaves of bread from the bakery, you're allowed to keep them. Again, the Gemara asks, how do you know? Maybe the owner doesn't know that they're lost. The Gemara says that it's yakiri. Different gears or different meaning can mean that it's expensive and therefore people check, or it can mean that it's heavy and therefore you'll know if you dropped it. Next case is if you found tongues of purple wool. Again, same question. And the Gemara answers, since they are valuable, they're important. Again, people check for them and know when they're lost, like Rabbi Yitzchak said. Next, we had money which is found in shuls or in a base medrash. This is not an Mishnah. This is a brisa coming up, or it's found in any place where there's a lot of people there. You're allowed to keep them because the Mishnah there said, the brisa there says explicitly because the owner is miyayish. Again, he doesn't know that he lost it. And here's where Rabbi Yitzchak said people check their wallets all the time, and therefore you know that it was lost. Now the Gemara goes to a different sugya to bring a raya, and this is from the sugya of leket. We know that there's a din of leket shikha paya, items which must be left for the poor people, for the aniyim in the field, and it belongs to the aniyim. It's their possession. Now, at what point do you say that the aniyim have taken their fill and they are no longer going to take from them, and anybody is allowed to take them? Well, that would be the point at which the aniyim are miyayish, which they relinquish their ownership. At what point are the aniyim miyayish? Are the aniyim miyayish? So the brisa says two versions. According to one, it's when old aniyim who walk on a walking stick very slowly and they see everything. Once they go through, aniyim say, there's no way I'm going to find anything there anymore, and they're miyayish. The term that's used there is nemushais. Rav Yochanan says it means old people on the walking stick. Rish Lakish says it means that you had two sets of poor people that went through, two waves. One got the original things, and then a second went and got everything. Anything else that's left, aniyim or miyayish, and therefore if there is something left, anyone can take that. So the Gemara asks the kasha, only the aniyim that are here in this area near this field know that the nemushais, whether it means the old people of the second wave, have been through it. They're miyayish because they're aware that it's already reached that stage of the collection. And people in a different town don't know that it happened, so they're not aware, and therefore they can't be miyayish. So it's the same case of Yesh Lamidas. So we should say that it belongs to those aniyim because they weren't miyayish. It didn't relinquish their rights and their ownership yet. So my answer is those people in a different town relinquished their ownership already before anyone collects anything, because they know that there's plenty of poor people in this town and they're going to get it. Like someone who lives in Yerushalayim is not going to be able to collect the leket, shikha, and pei, and tzvas because he knows that the aniyim there are going to collect it first. The Gemara now goes again to another sugya. If somebody's walking along the road and he finds dried figs or fresh dates along the road, he's allowed to keep them, but if he finds cheruvim or olives, cheruvim are the buksar, then he's not allowed to keep them. Now, the figs and the dates he's allowed to keep, even if he knows clearly which field they're from. Even if the dried figs are found next to a field full of drying figs, and the dates are found under a tree hanging over the road full of fresh dates. So he knows exactly where they fell from. He's allowed to keep them anyway, which means we understand that the owner is miyayish, and also he doesn't have to take meiser from them because they're hefker, which is something that happens when the owner is miyayish. Now, the Gemara says, what is the difference between the figs and the dates as opposed to the olives and the cheruvim? So the Gemara assumes that the reason is that the figs and the dates, since they're valuable, the owner checks them all the time, and he knows that they fell, and he's mafkir them. And it's yish midas. However, the olives and the cheruvim are yish shaloi midas, because it's not so valuable and people don't check for them. So that's a clear raya to Abaye against Rava. You see that the one that people know about, you're allowed to keep, and the one people don't know about, you're not allowed to keep. So when it says Rava will tell you this has nothing to do with that. People are not miyayish on it because they understand that everyone can tell that it's from my field. It looks like it's from my field. It's from my field. People aren't going to be miyayish on it. The difference between the figs and the dates, the reason that they're hefker is because when they fall, they smash. and they become disgusting, and people don't want them anymore. That's why they're hefker. The cheruvim and the zaysim do not, and that's why they stay the property of the owner. If he would be miyash, you're right, but he's not miyash because he knows that no one's going to take them because they know that they belong to him. And the Gemara brings another proof. We have a brayso that says that if a thief takes from one person and gives to others, or a gazlan, so we have a ganaf and a gazlan are both mentioned as taken from one and giving to others, or even the river, the Yarden, that floods property out of one field and deposits it in another field, whoever receives it is allowed to keep them. Now, says the Gemara, obviously the reason is because of the yish of the owner. So now, the Yarden and the Gazlan is someone who breaks in, who steals by force, by fear, then obviously the owner knows that it was taken from his property, and therefore it's a yish midas. It's not a shayla of yish midas. However, in Ghana, if somebody sneaks in, the owner doesn't find out about it until he looks for it. So it's yish midas. How could Abaye explain why the one who receives it is allowed to keep it? So Abaye answers, Ganef here doesn't mean a regular sneak thief. Ganef means listim mizuyim. Listim mizuyim are armed robbers. They are also called ganovim. And the reason that you're allowed to, and they are the type of ganovim that you're aware of. So Gemara asks, they're really the same as gazlanim. They fall into the category of gazlanim. Gemara says two types of gazlanim, listim mizuyim, armed robbers, and people who take by force are both gazlanim, and it mentions two types.